if I'm an end user and I am listening to this, and I'm saying like, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I believe in solutions. I believe in create value, exponential value creation. I do think what I deliver is greater than the budgets that I'm receiving now. What do we being the collective we that want to see this change, what do you suggest that we do with this?
Well, after we had that conversation in New York, somebody came up to me afterwards and said, the problem is, you're not on the revenue side of the P&L statement, you're on the cost side. And that's a reality that we all have to face, right? Because in response to one of the end user remarks that we got there, I was thinking, how do you put this to an end user in a framework that they understand? Well, that value disparity is happening inside the pay structure of their company too. That director of marketing is probably getting paid more than the director of security, right? So how does that reconcile? And how do you say, we all belong together in this, this is an uprising, if you will, but it's not just the parts and the services that we vendors sell, it's also how security personnel are compensated inside of their organizations. And I think that's all of one piece.
Yeah, so it's an entire leveling up, if you would, of perception, but then even just very tangible things like what we expect to pay these people to go deliver the value that is there.
Mm-hmm. I think, the thing that I would observe from the integrator's seat is when we are most successful unlocking additional spend inside of end users, it always comes from a position of understanding deeply, going way back in the chain to the stakeholder requirements of the organization. I think this gets to what you're talking about, which is, if we don't understand sort of board level, C-level expectations and requirements, whether that, preserving a brand, these kind of things that are way above a bill of materials for installing systems and parts and pieces, then you can begin to attribute value to the things that are truly important to the true stakeholders of an organization. And that is, look, we struggle with that too. It's a different set of muscle memory and engagements from an account management perspective and all those kind of things. You got to slow down, back up, have a different set of conversations. A lot of times above the pay grade a bit of our traditional stakeholders inside of our end user organizations. But if we do that well, then we begin to get a much clearer picture of the things that truly can preserve or create value, from a risk and revenue perspective for end users. And then, tying that to longer term roadmaps on what does technology transformation look like, what are the investments you need to make over a multi-year period of time. When we can align those things, I think we end up in a much different place in terms of, being clear on the value that is created by the investments in the technology.
Mm-hmm. Somewhere, I think it's probably on LinkedIn, somebody put a graph and it was like security budget before an incident, and it was security budget after an incident, right?
Yeah.
And the sad truth is that it often takes an incident to get people to devote more spending in the area. And how do we break out of that cycle?
Yeah, no, I mean, you look back in time, and I guarantee you, coming out of the tragedy that just happened with the United Healthcare CEO, I can imagine there was conversations about budgets that have increased and the need to at least address some of those holes. And coming out of COVID, we saw the uptick on some of these architectures of, say, like cloud-based systems and that before people were like, well, no, I haven't needed to, but now I have to remotely access my system. Yeah, so now I need it. So yeah, getting out of the 9/11 Lockerbie, these types of events that create the conversation, schools, shootings, the rest of it, right?
Fortunately, the federal government and some of the state governments have stepped up with grant programs for schools, but you kind of feel like it shouldn't have to come to that, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, I would just say, your point's well noted, because budgets and traditional decision makers have usually created some limitation in terms of, are you dealing with procurement or facilities management, or are you dealing with a CFO or a board level or even a CMO? And we're seeing use cases where, because the tech has evolved, driven by AI, and we've talked about, and in fact, this was Eric's coined term, visual intelligence, for the camera being a sensor, we've seen a lot of retailers use a marketing and growth budget to optimize merchandising, foot traffic, placement of materials or displays or end caps in a retail environment, in addition to loss prevention and security issues. So when you can affect the top line and when you can use your tech to drive different outcomes based on the needs, it's very powerful. And those solutions are flying off the shelf, right? In terms of the use cases of what national and global retailers are using now to leverage the traditional surveillance solutions in a very different way.
Yeah, there's definitely the opportunity to redefine what the value of security is that goes beyond keeping people safe, which is, I think, a great utility bedrock,
Absolutely.
great value statement. It's probably why we get talent into the industry as well. But yeah, if we can deliver beyond and able to communicate that, show ROI on those things, it should open up. But it's definitely not going to happen overnight. But these are, again, I think the right type of conversations to be had versus, having them in the back office where we've complained about it and then not do anything. I think it's the opportunity for us to do it. So I appreciate you bringing it to light through this type of, it's actually what is great about this report.